Day 6 of the September 95 7-day retreat in Springwater. I've noted down a couple of questions. One dates back quite a few days. It was something like this. In this work of just being here from moment to moment, where is the basis for ethical behavior, for moral responsibility? And more recently, someone asking, why do you never talk about commitment? When all the other teachers I know or have read do talk about it, the importance of commitment. The person said, when I play golf, my golf pro says, unless you practice more, you won't get better. And so it is with my tennis teacher, my piano teacher, my writing teacher. Each one pressing the point, you got to commit yourself to so and so much time every day, come rain or shine, to practice. And why don't you do this? And why do all the other teachers do it? Maybe it's one of the advantages of not calling oneself a teacher, then one doesn't have to do it. It just occurred right this moment. I could have all kinds of fanciful explanations why other teachers do it, but it's really not my business to speak for others. Maybe in this whole vast panorama of what? Of ways of finding out about oneself, meeting oneself. It's all right to have one place, or maybe there are others, where there is no emphasis or stress put on commitment. But that's also just thinking about it. That's not the reason for not talking about it. Why don't I talk about it? Because I came from that very tradition where practice is spelled bold, italics, spaced, capitals. All the buttons pushed to make this thing stand out. Practice, practice, practice. Commit yourself to this practice, this teacher, this tradition, this sect, this place. this teaching. Is it that this, together with so many other of our deeply ingrained habits, one superimposed upon the other, it also falls under questioning? Because if one questions everything, one questions everything. Wondering about what this thing of commitment is or has been for one in the past, what one has observed in other people who have professed this commitment, vowed it. We used to vow at least once a day what we were all going to do: become enlightened, cut the roots of delusive passions, enter through all the gates, all the obstacles, attain the great way. Four vows, several times a day. I felt that in the very beginning to be presumptuous. I vow to become enlightened for the sake of all living beings. Then we changed it. I wasn't involved in it. Someone else was. All beings, one body I vowed to liberate. That's what we vowed. It seemed presumptuous, probably because I didn't understand it. That would be usually the answer given if one questioned something. Just sit long enough and you will understand it. See, can one discern or has discerned or keeps discerning a difference between an imposition of commitment? I have to do this because one has to commit oneself. This is what my teacher expects of me. This is what thousands of years of tradition have taught, commitment. Therefore, I have to do this. It's sort of an external pressure taken on unquestioningly. Or discerning the difference between that and maybe, in the absence of that, coming upon something within which nags. Why am I suffering? Why is everyone else suffering? Why are we imposing suffering upon each other? What's the meaning of it? Endless wars, persecutions, hatred expressed or unexpressed smoldering. Why do I react so instantly, so unconsciously? And a lot of the time so utterly inappropriately. Why? Why all this reactiveness observed in oneself and in each other, which gives us so much trouble in relationship? Why? And the whys that are asked, maybe in the beginning, leading one right to the books of the experts, psychological, spiritual. Reading, looking, studying, debating, arguing. Oh. And finding with time that the intellect cannot satisfy the nagging inside for meaning, for understanding deeply, for resolving the thickness of confusion, of guilt, of blame, regrets. And as we talked about the other day, constantly reaching out into the future. What is it all about? What is resistance all about? What is fear all about? There isn't a person in this room or who has come to retreat who has not talked about fear and anger. The pain of it, the burden of it, the thickness of it. The darkness of it. And the yearning to be free of it. So, in meeting each other with this yearning, here we are together, with this yearning for freedom from reactiveness in fear, anger, vengeful thoughts, hurtful ideas, the hurts of a lifetime, reacting in oneself. So here we're coming together. Is it a given to impose commitment on each other? Or is it enough to have this yearning and wondering and questioning? And maybe alone or together, one-on-one, 3, 4, 10 people meeting together, learning about each other, learning about oneself, listening to each other, listening inwardly as somebody talks, and reactiveness is about to sputter out, to listen, or it is sputtering out, or it has sputtered. Do we need commitment to listen to ourselves and to each other? Or is it a thing that unfolds in and of itself? As we suffer from the cramped feelings of our reactions, physical, mental, psychological, the stress of memories. What I did wrong, it came up, I think, in one retreat, in one meeting here. Or was it before retreat? It all sort of melts into one moment of people coming together questioning. Why do I carry this burden of guilt about what I did in the past? I don't want it. It prevents freedom now. So is the burden that each one of us is carrying, and the wondering about it and the interest to find out more about it, is that what keeps us getting together in silence, or sitting down at home quietly in the morning, or at night, or in the middle of the day, when at times there seems to be no other option but to, at one time, moment or another, whenever possible, to find some quiet time, to let this muddy pool reveal itself without being stirred any further. I'm really wondering, and have wondered all along, maybe never quite expressed it clearly, whether making these vows and these commitments, which have sort of a self-inspiring effect as you chant this stuff together, vow it to yourself, vow it to your teacher. A person told me, for one course, I have to put it into writing, make a contract with myself or with a teacher, I don't quite remember. So putting sort of some solemnity on this whole process, whether this may shade or somewhat drown out the simplicity of beginning to listen, not knowing what's going on, not committing, not vowing, but wondering what it is all about to myself and each other. The turmoil in which we live, the tension. I don't have to keep going over it. We all know it very well. Although at times we can forget about it in a moment of whatever, a walk, listening to music, expressing oneself musically, artistically, or being with a friend, sharing sex. Maybe for a moment there is no burden because there's no thought about it. The mind is absorbed, the mind-body are absorbed. And as the absorption wanes, the patterns, the old patterns, the tracks on which the train rides, reappear. What are these tracks? What is the train? What's going on? Can we come to this? Maybe many of us have come to this, where questioning into turmoil or upset or stress or confusion, discomfort or pain, we're questioning into this, quietly sitting with it, is not a commitment, but it is the most natural thing in the world to do. It's not a choice, it's not an option. It's what's here, beckoning to be heard, to be felt, to be listened to be wondered about. And can one, in the course of this work, getting together retreats, quietly at home, become ever more sensitive to this beckoning? To get in touch with what's there, what's here. Right under our nose, right in front of our eyes, right within this skin, if you will. And of course, in relating to others who are not so different from ourselves, in their distress and yearning, to be free of it. And then not to keep entertaining the idea of freedom from it, maybe vowing to be free of this, but sticking with the imprisonment. What is that? Not labeling it as such, as I just did, because it has tremendous impact, but feeling it out, wondering about it spaciously, silently, not knowing what it is all about, but listening afresh this moment of resistance or distress, anger, or fear. Now, if I said, just ask yourselves, ask ourselves. If I said, sit every day, 2 times, 3 times an hour, twice as much as you're sitting now, would that help in this? Getting together with ourselves? Or would it very easily, from the beginning or in the course of time, fall into that same groove in which we've grown up? Being told, very often forced to do things that we didn't want to do. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. And with that being forced to do things, the resistance. I remember that we had to force our son to go to school. He did not want to go to school. He wanted to stay home with mom. It was heart-wrenching. Or he went to school a year later than, well, he was born on a date where this was possible. He wanted to stay in the classroom. He cried. Had to leave him there, and of course, reading something in the eyes of the teacher, wondering about this mother who had a hard time leaving her son, who was clinging to her. And that resistance to school remained with him from that first day on, of being forced to go there. And the associations in the mind linking up. I remember once on a trip out west, we drove by a depot of school buses. It was summertime vacation. And quite a while later, Ralph said, "I hate yellow." I don't think I've ever seen him dressed in yellow. He didn't even ride a school bus. Our house was right across from the school. And every noon when that door opened, he seemed to be the first or one of the first, making a dash home, right across the lawn, opening the door. I had unlocked it. And in he was. "Mom?" So, getting all embroiled in memories. But we were coming from saying that wherever there is a force, there is a resistance. We learned that in physics, I think the first day of our physics lesson in high school. It's one of the principles of physics, the resistance to changing one's position, needing force. But be it as it may in physics, we can observe it in ourselves. Maybe that's why we are so full of resistance, because we're so full of forcing ourselves or having been forced. Thinking this is good for me, this is right, this is what is expected of me, this is what I have to do to succeed, not to be a failure. Pushing, and simultaneously the counter push. And then maybe if, having been brought up this way, if somebody is not pushing, demanding, why don't you push me? I'm not saying the person who brought it up did that, but this comes up, doesn't it? I need to be pushed, people say to me. I need to be made to do something, or else I won't do it. Can we question that? Air it out. In Switzerland, it's an interesting habit. People sleep usually under down covers, light ones, heavy ones in the winter. And whatever the bedding is, every morning you see these downs hanging out from the windows to be aired. You're an impossible housewife if you don't hang out your covers to air out. So can we air out in the fresh air, in the sunshine, light of day? What? Everything. Our desire for commitment, our desire for being pushed, our resistances against being pushed. And underneath the smoldering discomfort of the day, what is it? Not analytical, what is it, but directly. But as we've said throughout the retreat, coming in touch with the stress of conditioning, inevitable stress of conditioning, because it is limitation upon limitation, with the resistance it brings to being limited, with airing that, shedding light, on fear, anger, by observing it, being with it, watching it. Maybe oneself isn't angry, but one is in the presence of an angry person and watches the intense discomfort with that person's anger. Or how contagious it becomes, getting angry at someone, being angry, watching it spaciously. Maybe the first thought in the morning waking up is a fearful one. To watch it, not to take it for inevitable or necessary or for granted. What is it? This moment of a thought and the discomfort. Spaciously watched, spaciously felt, observed, listened to. But this matter of being silent for a while, during the year or during the day, during the week, is not just coming upon the conditioning. How do we come upon it? What is the state of being in which there is listening, no matter what comes up, or no matter if anything comes up? What is the state of listening, of being, in which whatever comes up can do so without needing to be impeded, blocked, meddled with, or judged? What is that state of being? Which mostly reveals itself in silence, quietude. Regardless how one may argue theoretically that this is not a dualistic world, it's there all the time. no matter what I do. But let's let go of the theory of it, or what other people have said, or what I would love to be true, and see how it is. Whether it isn't the most likely to reveal itself, this quiet spaciousness of just being, non-judgmental, non-referential. When there is quietness around us, a moment of not having to perform, a moment of not having to be something, and then the urge to be something may reveal itself like in a bright mirror in this quiet sitting. I ought to do, I ought to be, I want to be what I will be. Revealing itself in clarity, in quietness. And when there's really stillness and quietness, things are not sticky anymore. They come and they go. Do they? Not theorize about it. Watch it. And the body itself begins to find out about itself, about its tensions with thoughts and memories and anticipations, how it tenses, and also how it releases when there's a moment of quietness in which tensions become graspable, palpable. You can say, well, I can feel my tensions, but they don't release. Then let them hold on. And watch. Give it enormous space, which is what we are, what we live in, what we actually are is vast space with little ripples of reactions. Which, if the vast space is not felt, is not sensed, these little ripples become enormous waves, enormous problems, enormous hindrances. But it's still only happening in vast space. So, what I'm trying to get at, maybe I'm not putting it clearly, can we come to what we need to do and feel not just the necessity of it, but also the beauty of it, the naturalness of it, the smoothing out of it, the healing, holding of it by ourselves, without needing to impose upon ourselves a regimen to which there will be resistance. You could say, wait a minute, no, I have a regimen, a very good one. I have no resistance to it. Well, then that's fine. But if resistance arises, what is it? Probe into it. Nothing has to be done about it. It comes and goes on its own when it is not provoked or prolonged by more force. So coming to the earlier question, where in this moment-to-moment work of attending, being here, watching, listening, where is the basis for moral behavior, moral ethical behavior, which over the centuries, over the millennia, human beings have carved out for themselves commandments, precepts, guidelines. Before we go into the question, one could make observations how well, even though we have these things carved out, how well have we kept them? What have they done for us? Do moral precepts open the mind to itself, to what it is doing, sensitively? Or do they have a tendency to harden? Hard on oneself and therefore hard on others. Goes hand in hand. If I keep these precepts, you better do too. And our history is full of vengeance on those who don't keep my moral precepts, or those that I'm subscribing to. But again, if it works for a person, having precepts, having commandments, and feeling a freedom in it, a freedom from what? Freedom not to do evil? What is that? This brain cannot be trusted too much. It has a way of turning evil into something good if it wants to pursue it. Rationalizing, hiding, masquerading. It needs to be illuminated in its doings and not trusted to tell us the truth about what we're doing or what others are. So then where does moral behavior or ethical behavior come from? But what is ethical moral behavior? What are we referring to when we speak about it and yearn for it? Or want to make sure it's going to happen? What are we referring to? Loving one another? Caring for one another? Not hurting each other? Helping each other? Find our way? Being sensitive to each other? If there is no sensitivity to others, how can we love them? No sensitivity to what is going on in oneself and others. How can we care for each other? Can we prescribe in precepts and commandments to be sensitive? To be open and understanding? To be compassionate? Or are these qualities a natural outcome of being here quietly with oneself, beginning to understand how one reacts so quickly? I don't really know how all this happens, but it isn't through taking formulated commandments. Maybe one can say that to the degree that this constant revolving around oneself in thought and image and emotion abates a bit. And it abates when energy gathers in presence, being here, listening, looking attentively. Out of that grows more compassion or empathy, understanding, sensitivity to others. There's not such a blockage, not so much shadow cast. But does this already sound like moralizing again? It can be picked up like this by the brain that's used to it. Don't be selfish, become selfless. It doesn't work though. First the self has to be seen, felt, watched, learned about. In its doings, in its whatever all goes on with it, its consequences, and self meaning our reactiveness, our fears. With that quality of listening and looking that does not judge, and therefore creates space for everyone else to be seen and felt and heard. Can we trust that? I trust it completely. It's the only thing that can be trusted. Can one impart that trust to others? I don't know. I think we have to be in touch ourselves. Not as selves, but as this enormous listening space of not knowing, allowing what there is to be, not knowing how long it will be there, and watching the want to get rid of it or the want to hold on to it, illuminating the whole thing. Then one may not even know about compassion. It just operates in an amazing way. We will end here for today.